Are your Linux servers staging a rebellion? Does every syslog read like a cryptic riddle and every config file feel like it's written in ancient penguin hieroglyphs? I feel your pain. Sometimes managing Linux servers can feel like herding penguins in a blizzard. And that's where I waddle in. For the past 20 years, I've been the Linux whisperer, teaching millions how to tame their terminals and helping businesses turn their renegade servers into smooth running machines. And now I'm offering my consulting services directly to you. Whether your issue is a rogue process wreaking havoc, a server slower than a turtle, or the desire to automate tasks so you can finally take that vacation, I've got you covered. Whether you need help with troubleshooting, optimization, configuration, automation, or even security hardening, I'll help you solve just about any Linux-related conundrum, even the ones that make you feel like you want to throw your laptop out the window. Let's turn your Linux headaches into high fives. Ready to team up? If so, head on over to learnlinux.tv and click on the Linux Consulting button. I look forward to working with you. Hello and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. In this video, what I'm going to do is provide you with more Proxmox content. I love Proxmox. It's my hypervisor of choice. It's what I use. And I also have all kinds of videos on this channel that'll teach you everything you need to know to learn how to use it. But in this video, what I'm going to do is combine Proxmox with one of my favorite provisioning tools, Terraform. If you haven't already heard of Terraform before, it's an awesome utility you can use to provision resources on a variety of platforms. You could use it with various cloud providers and hypervisors, and you could fine-tune all kinds of things such as RAM, storage space, networking, you name it. It's a powerful tool, and you're going to see it in action today. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to provision Proxmox virtual machines with Terraform. It's going to be a ton of fun. Now let's dive into Terraform and Proxmox. First, let's talk about what you're going to need in order to get started. First, you're going to need a Proxmox server. If you aren't already using Proxmox, I have all kinds of resources on my channel to get you started. I'll leave a card for a video right about here that you can watch to get started with Proxmox. In that video, it'll walk you through everything you need to get it set up, and it'll also go over some of the basics. Continuing, another thing you'll need is a template within your Proxmox installation. We'll be using this template to serve as the base for the virtual machine that we'll be deploying. If you haven't already created a template within Proxmox before, what I'll do is leave a card right about here for the episode of my full course that covers exactly how to do this. So at this point, you'll need to jot down two things. You'll need the URL to your Proxmox server, and you'll also need the name of your template file. So here what I'll do on my end is I'll sign into my Proxmox server, and yes, this is my actual Proxmox server. I'll paste in the password and click Login. Type in my second factor code right here, and as you can see, I'm logged in. So right here we can see my actual Proxmox installation that I use at my company. See all the servers that I have here, but what we actually need at this point, one, we need the URL. So I already have that here, but what we need to do is just copy this. So what you'll do is just write that down. And then the next thing, like I mentioned, is you'll need the name of the template that you plan on using. So right here, I have a template that's named Debian-12, and that's the one that I'm going to use. So again, you'll need a template already before you could go through this process. Now, the next thing we're going to do is create some resources that we need within Proxmox. Now, to be fair, you can use your normal user account with Terraform, but I don't recommend that. I like to silo things out in individual accounts, so that way we have more control over how our server is set up. So what I'm going to do is click on Data Center right here. And then once you do that, you could go down to Users right here. So what I'm going to do is add a new user. I'm just going to call it Terraform. And I'm not going to configure anything else here. I'm just going to set the name for now, and I'll simply click Add, and now we have the Terraform user right here. But that by itself isn't enough for us to use it. We're going to need to configure the account as well. Now next, what we're going to do to configure permissions, we need to configure the permissions that are necessary for Terraform to interact with Proxmox. So what I'll do is go here to Roles. Again, I went to Data Center, Then underneath permissions, if you expand that, we have roles. We'll click on that, and we're going to create a new one. So I'll create one right now. I'll call it Terraform Provision. And now what I'm going to do is add a few, actually more than a few, permissions to this user. There's actually more than a handful here. So what I recommend you do is just refer to the graphic that I'm going to be overlaying on the screen, and it's going to have a list of all the permissions that you need. You'll need to make sure that you add every single one of them. If you miss one, then things aren't going to work. And what you could do is just simply left-click on one of them. So the first one that we need here is datastore.allocate space. I'm going to simply left-click on it one time. You don't have to hold Shift. You don't have to hold Control or anything like that. Just simply click on it. So that's the first one. We also need datastore audit. So I'll click on that. Next, we need pool allocate. So I'll click on that. Next, for software-defined networking, we need sdn.use. And then next, we need sys.console. We need sys.modify. We also need vm.allocate, vm audit. We need vm clone. We need to clone the template. We need vm config cd-rom, CPU and cloud init. So we need these three so far here for vm config. We need vm config disk, vm config hardware type, vm config memory. So I'll click on that one as well. We also need the network option here. We need config.options. We need vm migrate, vm monitor, and also power management. Again, take your time and make sure that you get all of these. Just take a look at the graphic on the screen and just make sure you have everything here that I have outlined in that graphic, and you should be fine. So next, you just click anywhere here within this small window to make the dropdown go away, and then we can simply click Create. So at this point, we have a role called Terraform Provision, and it contains all of the settings right here that we need, so we should be good to go for that. So next, what we're going to do is click on Groups. We need to create a group that's going to hold the permissions that we have in the role. So what we'll do is click Create, and what I'll do is call it Terraform. Clever, I know. Just like that. And that's it. We have a group. We just needed to create a group named Terraform, and we've done that. So the next thing we'll do is click Permissions, because we need to add a group permission. So what we'll do is add permissions to the group that we just created. So we'll click Group Permission, just like that. We'll use the / right here. We'll just leave that there. For the group, we're going to choose Terraform, the one that we just created. And then we're going to scroll down, and you should see the role that we created with all the permissions right here. So what this does is effectively glue the permissions to the group, and then when we apply the group to the user, then effectively the user will have all of the permissions here that's in the role. So click Add. Next, we'll go back to Users, and we'll select the Terraform user that we created earlier. We're going to edit that user. And then under Group, we're going to select the Terraform group that we just created. And this is the final step that links everything together. So at this point, this user, as soon as I click OK, is going to have all of the permissions that we've created. So I'll click OK, and now we have that. So far, so good. Next, what we're going to do is create an API token. We want to create an API token because we would rather not use usernames and passwords if we can help it. API is better, so I'll click Add. And what we're going to do is choose our Terraform user. For the token ID, you could call this anything you want, really. It's just a description. I'm just going to type Terraform there. I think that's good enough. And we're going to uncheck this box for privilege separation. We want this user to be able to do all the things that we've designated for it to do. So I'm going to uncheck that box, and I'm going to click Add. Now at this point, we get two pieces of information here, and we need to jot this down. We need both of these things. The secret key we are not going to be able to access after this. So what I'll do is just open up a text editor here, as should you. And what I'm going to do is just paste the key right here. And then the ID is the first number. We'll need that as well, so I'll grab it. And I'll paste it right here. Now, obviously, you should never, ever, ever show this key to anyone in clear text. The only reason I can get away with showing you my key is because I'm going to be deleting it by the time you see this video, actually before you see this video. So by the time you see the edited version of this video, this key won't exist. You won't be able to use it. But I think it's kind of cool to show people how things actually look without blurring anything if I can help it. So that's why I wanted you guys to see that. Now what we're going to do is just minimize this right here. We'll need that later. But for right now, we're almost ready to get started with Terraform. Now what we're going to do, just open up a new tab. Search for Terraform. And right here it is. It's terraform.io. So you just go to terraform.io. We're going to go to download. We're going to download it, and there's several different versions or methods for installing Terraform. Now, what I'm going to do is scroll down and choose the AMD 64 binary. If you're using ARM or another CPU type, then obviously you would choose whichever one more closely matches what you're running. Most of us are going to be AMD 64. So what we're going to do is right-click on this and click Copy Link Address. So that's all we need right now. Now what we're going to do is switch to a terminal. And what I'm going to do is type wget, and then I'm going to paste in the URL that we just copied. And what this is going to do is download Terraform locally. So I'll press enter. So in my output right here, you can see that Terraform was downloaded. Now what we'll need is to unzip it. Now you may or may not have unzip available. So what we could do is just type Command-V and then unzip. And when I press enter, you can see that I do have that installed. Now, if you don't, you might just have to install the unzip package, such as sudo apt install unzip, for example. But if you don't have it, you could go ahead and download that package and we can unzip it. To do that, though, we'll type unzip, and then the name of the package right here. And then if I list my storage, I have Terraform right there. It's the third line from the bottom in the output of ls. So what I'm going to do, just to be on the safe side, I don't want anyone to modify this file. So what I'm going to do is have root own this file. And as you can see, it's now owned by root. So next what I'm going to do is move this into /user/local bin, just like that. And if I type Command-V and then Terraform, you can see that it is recognized in /user local bin Terraform. Now, after moving it there, if it's not recognized, you could type out the full path to it, and that'll probably work just fine. You really shouldn't have to do that. But anyway, as of right now, we have the Terraform command available. And what we're going to do is make a Terraform directory. And this is going to hold the files that we're going to be working with. So I'll just navigate into that directory right there. And what we're going to do is create our very first Terraform file. Sorry to interrupt my own video, but I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I love creating Linux-related content for you guys. But unfortunately, producing high-quality Linux content like this isn't cheap. But if you want to help me make even more content for you guys, then consider supporting Learn Linux TV. And a great way to do that is to check out the official shop for Learn Linux TV, which was just recently updated. Inside the shop, you'll find distro-themed shirts, bags, drinkware, and more. And there's some other surprises there as well. For example, I've just introduced a mousepad that doubles as a Tmux cheat sheet. How cool is that? So check out the shop at merch.learnlinux.tv, or you could check out the merch shelf right here on YouTube. You could get yourself something really cool and support Linux learning at the same time, so it's a win-win. Anyway, thank you guys so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the video. And what I'll do is take you through it. So I'm going to use Vim. It doesn't really matter what text editor you use. You could use Nano, Vim, it doesn't matter. So you could do Nano, main.tf. I'm going to use Vim. I have an entire series on Vim, by the way. If you're interested in learning that, you could check out the full course already on my channel. But I'm going to go ahead and create this file. Now, to save a little time, what I'm going to do is paste in the code right here. I will have this linked down below, so if you want to copy and paste this as well, you will be able to access this code. So I'll paste it in. And then I'll go up to the top and I'm going to explain a little bit about what we're doing. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is go back to our text file where I asked you to jot some things down. And here's mine. So what I'm going to do is copy this here. This is the ID, and we're going to put it in right here. And after we set this up, I'm going to go back to the top and explain exactly what we're doing. But we definitely want to make sure that we have our secret key here. And our ID, we need that to be correct. And then right here under PM_API_URL, we have the URL to my server. Now, the URL stops here. Normally, where you have 8006, that's the port number. So you're adding the /API2/JSON to the end of the URL. So it should look similar to mine. Obviously, your key will be different, but it should look very similar to that. So that's what we're setting up that's specific to our server. Now, another thing to pay attention to before we go through all the code here, target node and clone. So target node is the name of your Proxmox server. So if I was to go back to Proxmox, you can see I have PVE-1 and PVE-2. So that's the name you're looking for. So I'm going to have Terraform launch a virtual machine instance on PVE-1. So that's why I chose to include that. So let's minimize this. And there's the PVE-1. And then the template name. So again, if I go back to the browser, right here I have Debian-12. So we need to name the clone field here. We're going to clone the Debian-12 template. So that's why we need to make sure that that's correct. Now that we have that set up, let's go back to the top and find out what exactly we're doing here. We have all this code here. What is going on? So what I'll do is start from the top and I will explain it. So up at the top, we have some settings, or mainly one setting that is specific to Terraform itself. We need to set some required providers. Now, this step isn't really always required. I mean, in the past when I've done this, I only needed to start here where it has provider Proxmox, and then everything else kind of just worked. But for some reason or another lately, I have to add this. What we're doing is we're creating a provider called Proxmox, and then we're telling it the source that we want the provider to come from. Now, what this refers to is a provisioner. This is a system or a utility or plugin that Terraform is going to use to interact with the target, whether your target is AWS, it could be VMware, it could be VirtualBox, or whatever it is. You need a provider for that particular service. So since we're working with Proxmox, we're going to need the Proxmox provider. And what we're doing here is we're effectively saying that we are identifying a provider called Proxmox is equal to this. So that way down here, we could just refer to it as Proxmox, since that's what we typed right here. So we can refer to it as that right here. And in this section here, we have several things that we need. And we kind of already went over this. I mean, you can use a username and password here if you want to bypass the API. I don't recommend that. So using the API, this is what it looks like. We have PM_API_URL, and then we set it to the URL of the server, the target server. Again, we're adding /API2/JSON to the end of that. The token ID came from the creation of the API token earlier, so this is the ID field of that. And then the API token secret is right here. And I want to underscore the fact you should never, ever, ever show a token anywhere. Do not upload this file with a token to GitHub. Do not post this anywhere. If anyone gets this key, they can immediately start provisioning virtual machines on your instance. And you want to be the only one doing that. You don't want someone obviously breaking into your server. So keep this safe. Again, since I'm going to be deleting this API token before this video is posted, that's the only reason why I can get away with this. We want to allow an insecure connection. On my end, this isn't really necessary because I do have TLS certificates on my installation, but I know many of you won't. A lot of you in my audience are going to be using the IP address, and maybe you don't have a certificate set up yet, so I wanted to include that. Obviously, you can customize that accordingly, but we're just going to leave that alone for now. Now here on line 16, continuing, let's talk about what we're doing right here. We want to create a resource or provision a resource. We want to provision a QEMU virtual machine with Proxmox, so that's why we have this right here. And here we want to give the instance a name to refer to it as. So here we're going to call it VM-instance, and I have the name also right here. That's the name of the instance. Target node PVE1. And we're going to clone the Debian 12 template, like I mentioned. We want to do a full clone, not a linked clone. I mean, you could do a linked clone, but I really don't like that. I like to just, instantiate everything immediately and not have too many things be thin provision, but I want a full clone there for cores. We have 2. I think that's good enough for an example. 2048 megabytes of RAM. And then we have a subsection right here. Notice that disk here is aligned to memory. That's important. We're going to set some parameters regarding the disk. Now, what I did on my end, size is required. Even though we're running, with a template, it already has a disk. In my opinion, we shouldn't need to set a size since it already has one, but it's not going to let us continue without it. So what I did here is I just set the size to the same size of the disk in the template. So what I did was just match it here. Type, we're going to leave it as SCSI. For storage, I have mine set to local-LVM. Now, this might be different for you. So before we go any further, let's talk about it. So as you can see right here, my main storage is local-LVM. That's the one that I'm using. Yours might be different, especially if you're using ZFS, then the name will be different. So for some of you, if you leave this as is, it might not work. You want to match this to your primary storage. And in my case, it's going to be local-LVM. So that's good enough for me. So disk card on, it's an SSD. My server uses all SSDs, so that's why I have that. You can set that to be off if you have spinning Rust, for example, but I'm going to leave that on. Now continuing, we have another subsection here for network. We're going to set this to virt.io. It's beyond the scope to change this around and show you the differences, but this one should work just good enough. Now this is incorrect. Let me fix this. VMBR1. Now what you want to do is kind of match the network here. So if I was to go to my node here, then down to network, you can see that I have 4 bridges right here. They're all for a different purpose. Now, what I want to do is use my VM subnet. So I have a VLAN and subnet that's set up for virtual machines specifically, and I call it VMBR1. That's something that I set up offline, actually probably during the filming of my original Proxmox course. You should check that out if you haven't already done that. But from the output, we know that the bridge I want to use, my VM subnet bridge, is VMBR1, so we're going to use that. You can have a firewall if you want. You could also set it to not be connected to the network when you first get started, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. What I'm going to do is save the file. And let's see what we need to do in order to use this. So the first thing we're going to do, and this is only necessary the first time you ever run Terraform inside a folder, we're going to type Terraform init, just like that. And what that should do is download the provider. Earlier, we designated that we want to use the Proxmox provider, but Terraform doesn't actually have built-in providers. Well, it might, but more often than not, you need to download a provider. And when you type Terraform init, it's going to check your main.tf file. Now notice, if I list my storage, that's all we have here, okay? So I'm going to type Terraform init, but I'm not even giving it a file name at all. But the thing is, Terraform knows that TF files are Terraform files, and if any exist in the same directory, it's going to read those. And since we have the provider information right there in the file, then they should find it. So I'll press enter here. As you can see, it's downloading the Proxmox provider right now. And it says that Terraform has been successfully initialized. So you should only really need to do this once, unless you delete all your files and have to recreate something. Usually when you set up Terraform or go to use it for the very first time, you type Terraform init, and that usually is the last time you have to do that. Now the next thing we're going to do is type Terraform and then plan. Now this will not make any changes to your server at all, but what it will do is at least try to get a general idea if you have any problems or syntax errors or something. So I'll press enter. And so far it looks okay. We have quite a bit of information here. Again, this is planned. It's not going to make any changes. But what this will do is tell you about the changes that it wants to make. And you really should pay special attention to this, especially if it tells you that it wants to delete something. Sometimes something can't be updated and needs to be deleted. It's just the way it is. We don't have anything created through this yet, though. So all we're going to do is see pluses here. It wants to create a VM instance. Well, that's great because that's what I wanted it to do. Automatic reboot. We have all these different options, some of which we haven't chosen, but these are just defaults. But what you could do is look through here and just make sure that all the settings that are important to you, such as the network bridge, you definitely want to be on the right network, make sure all of these are okay. And if everything looks good to you, then what we can do is go ahead and actually run Terraform. And to do that, what we'll do is run Terraform apply. We'll type yes, and then press enter. And actually, that should be it. So if we go back to our web browser right here, we can see that something is happening here. We have VMID 102, so something is being created. And right here, we see VM 922, which is going to be my Debian 12 template. It's ID 922. It matches. It's being cloned right here. So VMID 102. So we should actually see this come up. We're just waiting for it to finish, so we'll just give this a moment, and it should be ready to go. Actually, I think it already is. Notice that the name is VM instance. That's what we called it inside the file. And what I should be able to do is start this virtual machine. Let's see what happens. And check it out. The virtual machine that we created through Terraform is now booting up. So great job. You have successfully configured a virtual machine through Terraform. And there we go. How fun was that? In this video, we used Terraform to provision a virtual machine on Proxmox, and I really hope that you found it helpful. Now, I'd love to cover more Proxmox, and I also would love to cover more Terraform as well. So if you'd like to see content on either of those, let me know in the comments down below what in particular you would like to learn. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for checking out this video as usual. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you in the next video.